Franchi Talks Japanese Art. I'm Franchi and I'm back with a new video. So, if you remember, a few months back, I don't remember exactly when, I made a video about autumn plants. So, what kind of plants and flowers represent autumn in Japanese art, and what kind of art we find them depicted on, such as decorative arts or paintings. And now a few months have passed, the weather has gotten colder, and so it's winter. So what I thought that I would do today is make a similar video, but it's winter edition. So if this sounds interesting to you, make sure to stick around and let's jump right in. The first plant that I would like to look at today is the pine tree, in Japanese, matsu. Pine trees are a kind of a symbol of winter in so many cultures, and in Japanese culture especially because they stand tall during winter, also in the harshest weather, and of course they are an evergreen, so they don't lose their needles in winter. And for this reason, they have become a symbol of immortality as well as longevity. The first artwork that I would like to talk about today is a woodblock print by Utagawa Kuniyoshi. We can see it right now. It's a beautiful large print. We can see that it features at the top the pine trees. And when we look at it, we are immediately catapulted into a winter scene. It looks incredibly cold and very snowy. And we see the protagonist of this print. It's not the pine tree, but it's a woman. This woman is Tokiwa Gozen, also known as Lady Tokiwa, a noble lady from the Heian period who was married to the head of the Minamoto clan, Minamoto no Yoshitomo. Lady Tokiwa was forced to flee her house after her partner, or it's unclear whether it was her husband or they were just in a relationship. However, after her partner was defeated in battle during the Heiji Wars. And so we see her exactly in that moment. She is fleeing after the defeat of Minamoto no Yoshitomo, and we can see that she had to flee in a hurry. She's not wearing proper shoes, she's just wearing sandals, and she is carrying her three children. If you look carefully, you can see two of them at the bottom of the print. Hidden between all her robes, you can see some different colors, and these are the trousers and the clothes of the children. You can also see the head of one of them, and you can see that there's some extra feet at the bottom near her feet because these are the feet of her children who are fleeing with her. And there's a third child. The third child she's carrying in her arms. You cannot see his body, but you can just see there's a kind of circle near her chest, and that's his head, probably covered by some kind of blanket or textile to keep him warm. Thanks to her action, she and her children would survive, and her youngest child would become one of Japan's greatest heroes, Minamoto no Yoshitsune. What I think is outstanding about this woodblock print is the composition, how it flows vertically, and I also love how her children are hidden in the swaying of the textile. And also, of course, I love her face. It's kind of hard to read, but I'd say it's a determined look as she glances ahead at as a woman who is just doing what she has to, and she's very determined. And in a way, I feel like uh, Lady Tokiwa and the pine tree they can be compared because the pine tree stands tall also in the harshest moments in the coldest winters, and so does Lady Tokiwa, standing tall in the harshest moments of her life. Let's look at the second object which features the decoration of a pine tree, and in this one the pine tree plays a very important fundamental role. So we see this incense box decorated with lacquer. Uh, this is from the collection of the Met Museum in New York. And on the lid we find a decoration with two human figures and animals, and the pine trees. The two figures are a man and a woman. They are an elderly couple, and they are sweeping the floor with a broom. This recalls a story which is also told in a no theater play, which is called Takasago. The play, in fact, tells the story of two pine trees, Takasago and Sumiyoshi. These two pine trees are considered paired trees, even though they are located so far away. One, in fact, in Takasago and one in Sumiyoshi. And the two elderly couple who are sweeping under the pine tree one day are approached by a Shinto priest. And eventually they reveal to him while talking that they are indeed the spirits of these two trees, and they visit each other whenever they can, and they are, of course, incredibly in love. So, when they talk to this Shinto priest, they can show how, despite their old age, they're still very happy and still very much in love. And so, the play and the story in general has taken up a very auspicious meaning of happiness and happiness in the old age and a long life and a long lasting love. And of course, the pine trees themselves have also taken up this meaning of because they are evergreen, so they can represent an everlasting love or an everlasting life. And for this reason, a motif of pine trees can be found in objects which are connected to weddings as well as the new year. And we can see how this box could fit in this theme of the new year or in general of winter with auspicious motifs, not only because of the pine trees and the elderly couple which is represented on the lid, but also because around the box we find more winter motifs. In fact, we find pine cones, but also other winter plants, such as the bamboo and the plum. And as we're gonna see throughout this video, these plants are also connected to the winter. They're in fact called the three friends of winter. And so finding them on this box also connects them to this topic. The decoration on the incense box is very elaborate. There's like several lacquer techniques have been used to create the decoration, so I will not go into detail because this would take a video on its own, but there's just a couple of things that I would like to point attention to, my favorite details. Of course, in general, the whole box is decorated in gold, so very precious. There's also details of inlaid metals, which could be silver, and then I really like the way that the waves are depicted in a background with this geometric pattern. And then towards the bottom of the box, we can see some kind of ground, or I think it might be sand. And there's some sprinkled golden particles which are very shiny, and they remind me a little bit like when you are at the beach or somewhere with sand and the sun is shining onto the beach, there can be some kind of glow from particles in the sand. And I feel like this is giving the same idea. I find it very beautiful. Let's now look at our second plant of today, which is the bamboo. We mentioned when talking about the box that there is also a small part of the decoration dedicated to bamboo. And in fact, bamboo is also a famous plant of winter in Japanese culture because, like just like the pine, it is also an evergreen and it stands tall and green in the harshest winters and also under the snow. And the bamboo, it has also come to acquire a whole set of symbolical meanings due to its shape. In fact, how it stands tall and green has become to represent vitality and integrity. And because of how it bends in the winter but doesn't break, it also has become to symbolize resiliency. However, the inside of the bamboo is empty, and this internal cavity has come to represent humility as well as the ability to receive new teachings. And for this reason, well, because of all these characteristics actually, it has become a very beloved uh, plant in Buddhist art. And so let's look at an artwork which represent winterly bamboo, let's say, in this context of Buddhist art. We can see this beautiful monochrome painting by Taiho Shokon, who was actually a Chinese immigrant, a Chinese monk who had traveled to Japan and had started serving and actually became the abbot of the Mampukuji temple in Kyoto, which was the main temple of the Obaku Zen sect. Taiho Shokon became really famous because of his bamboo paintings, which were so, bamboo was one of the main subjects of his art. And we can see this one painting dated to 1774. What we can actually see is one section of the bamboo plant. If you notice, we don't see the extremities, neither the top nor the bottom. We can just see how beautifully he managed to depict bamboo using simple black ink. In fact, the main characteristic of monochrome ink painting is that it's monochrome, but thanks to the shades of black and turning into gray and the trait of the brush, he manages to create the different textures of the leaves and of the trunk. There's only one other color that he has used in this painting, which is white, which is this white pigment has been used to create the effect of snow sitting on the bamboo, and I find it really beautiful and really delicate and intelligently applied. The painted scroll is actually accompanied by a second scroll, which was created later by another monk who was also a Chinese immigrant and had joined the Mampukuji temple as a monk, Hakujin Shoko. He had written this poem in his 80s to accompany the scroll with the painted bamboo, and now I will read you the poem. He says, Bamboo expands, putting forth bamboo shoots over thick green leaves. Let a man contemplate the virtues of bamboo, elegance, strength, and firmness, and purify the roots of his karma. The theme of bamboo and of moral strength or moral capabilities are not only connected to the Buddhist religion but also to Chinese culture, especially to the Chinese culture of the literati and in general of exiled, well educated gentlemen. We can see this represented on an object from Japan, a Japanese sword guard, tsuba. And on this tsuba, we can see the representation of a man on horseback traveling through a winterly snowy bamboo forest. And on the back, on the reverse, we can see the two servants who accompanied him on this travel. This gentleman is Su She, who was a politician in China during the Song dynasty, as well as a poet, artist, writer, and so on. A very well educated man who shaped the culture of China without a doubt. And what happened to Susha was that eventually he criticized some reforms which were taking place during the Song dynasty, and this for these critiques he was exiled. And it was during this exile, which he lived in total poverty, that he wrote some of his best, apparently, works of poetry and calligraphy. And once again, it's hard not to make a comparison between the protagonist of the artwork and the plant, just like Lady Tokiwa. In this case as well, we can see that the bamboo standing tall in winter can be also a reference to Susho and his moral strength, the ability to stand tall in his beliefs and also create incredible, beautiful art during such a difficult moment as an exile. The next plant that we are going to see today is also a trooper who resists in the winter. And as we are seeing, this is kind of the leitmotif of today's video. And in this case, we're talking about the plum tree. In fact, the plum tree has gained a bit of a reputation in Japan because it blooms in January. It's the first tree to bloom before all other trees, and before it even grows leaves. The blooms are what comes first. And this has also given birth to an idiomatic expression, which is ume wa hyaka no sakigai, which means the plum is the pioneer of 100 plants, because of course it blooms before any other tree. And once again, it was in China that the characteristics of the plant were attributed to people as well. Specifically, during the Song Dynasty, the plum tree became a symbol of the literati gentlemen. So, men dedicated to the arts who lived in isolation gave up on earthly problems or issues and dedicated themselves to the making of art, especially aiming in the art not for realism but for spontaneous expression. So not mm, worrying so much about beauty, but rather concentrating themselves on creativity and expression. And the literati could be symbolized by this plant because of how they lived in isolation, just like the plum tree blooms alone. How they could create art in difficult conditions, such the same way that the plum tree can bloom in difficult conditions. And by the 19th century, the culture of the literati had also arrived in Japan, and it was actually very popular in different parts of society. And so the same ideas and the same topic of the plum tree was taken up by Japanese artists. So let's look at an artwork which depicts just this. We can see this painting uh, with ink on silk, and it depicts a lone fisherman on a lake near a snowy embankment which is covered by plum trees. Once again, the painting is accompanied by a poem which I will read to you. The tattered bamboo hut is covered with snow. In a lone boat is an old fisherman. Gazing at the empty woods at sunset, he seems tied down in the frozen stream. We can look at the painting, which we can see, in fact, a snowy winter scene with a lone fisherman just doing his job. And we can see that there is a kind of feeling of isolation and the solitude of this man who is surrounded by this kind of harsh environment. And I would like to notice that we can see the plum trees, and they are not the protagonists of the painting, because I think we can agree that the protagonist of the painting is the fisherman. However, they are represented at the forefront. They're actually partially covering the boat of the fisherman. They're really in the front of the scene. And you can see that they present small pink blossoms. They are one of the few uh, colored accents of the painting, and the plum trees are blooming in the snowy scene. As we mentioned, the literati culture was taking up in Japan, and there was this theme of isolation in nature. And this painting, which represents justice, was in fact painted by a Japanese literati painter, Takahashi Sohei, who was one of the most important, or the most important and famous um, student of the most important literati painter in Japan, who was Tanomura Chikuden. And in fact, Takahashi Sohei painted this piece at the residence of Tanomura Chikuden. So until now, we have talked about three plants: the plum tree, the pine, and the bamboo. And we mentioned earlier during our second object, when we were talking about the incense box, that these three plants together combined create a very wintry, auspicious motif, which is called the Three Friends of Winter. So let's talk about this a little bit longer, just a little bit more in depth. The first to paint together these three friends of winter was the Chinese painter Zhao Menjuan, who represented them in a beautiful painting. You can see it. I think this is outstanding. It's very simple. We can see just three little branches, one of pine, one of plum, and one of bamboo. However, in its simplicity, I find it incredibly beautiful. And then this theme was taken up in Chinese and Japanese art by a multitude of artists. And the three plants came to take up a variety of meaning, as we mentioned, often connected to the world of the literati. So, as we said, the pine tree stand to became came to stand for longevity, immortality, and vitality, and the plum tree came to be known for its meaning to be daring, to dare to be outstanding while at the same time keeping elegance and a certain kindness or delicacy. And the bamboo, also as we said, came to represent the strength to stand tall in line with one's morals, as well as the ability to be humble and to receive teachings. So I would like to see these three friends on one artwork. One which I think is connected to an art form which is which pays a lot of attention, a lot of care on seasons. And this is the art of the tea ceremony. In fact, the tea ceremony is art form which puts a lot of emphasis on seasons, such as the paintings which are displayed during the ceremony are always connected to the season. And the same goes for example, the foods that are served during the ceremony and also the bowls that are used. And we can see a tea bowl from the collection of the British Museum. I think it's very beautiful and it's connected to the season of winter. What we can see is a very simple yellow in color bowl which is covered on its surface by a cracked effect of the glaze. On the outside we can see some small blue petals, but we find the main decoration in the inside of the bowl. And we can see in fact the three friends of winter. At the bottom we see the bamboo leaves. To the right we can see the pine tree, and then at the top the plum. The decoration was created with using enamels, and we can see that it's in very simple colors such as green and blue, and it's only relegated to one area of the bowl on the right hand side. And I find the fact that the decoration is not covering the whole bowl very aesthetically pleasing. It keeps a certain subtlety and simplicity while going, let's say, straight to the point with the plants they chose to represent. The table is dated probably to the 18th century, and it is believed that it may have come from the Kiyomizu kilns in Japan. And after this, let's quickly look at one last plant for today. The last one, but it's very beautiful, which is the Camellia flowers, in Japanese, tsubaki. The Camellia flowers are very common in Japan and they were beloved since the ancient times. In fact, there are songs already from the 4th and 5th century which sing about the beauty of the camellias. And the camellias are also a winter plant because they flower already in December and January. They they bloom and flower in the coldest weather. And camellias are often represented in woodblock prints, often with other natural elements, especially birds. And this was a theme dear to the woodblock print artist Hiroshige. So let's look at one of his prints with camellia and sparrow. We can see at the top a sparrow flying, and at the bottom a camellia branch with a flower which is partially covered in snow. I find this depiction very delicate, very pretty and beautiful to look at. and the print is accompanied once again by a poem. The poem reads: Always look up to see where the camellia's blossom has fallen on the edge. And this idea of falling camellias is actually often found in poetry. This is because the camellia flower tends to drop in one go. The whole flower tends to just drop on the ground rather than dying petal by petal. And when it drops, of course, it makes a noise, which has become a motif found in poetry. And I find these representations of camellias very beautiful. Also, this poetic way in which they tend to die. So this is it for today's video. We saw some beautiful artworks and a lot of plants connected to the winter. I hope that this will make your winter a little bit more enjoyable. I will also try to do my best to enjoy the outside when it's possible. And I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you have any comments, feel free to write them in the comment section. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm always happy to read those. And if you like the channel, make sure to subscribe so you can see the next videos which will be coming up. I'm already working on some more videos. And there's a little news because I opened a Patreon account. I might make a separate video about this, but I'm not sure yet. So I will just say that if you want to support the channel, you can through Patreon. The link is in the description, and it's gonna be very useful for me. I will do my best to make more videos in the upcoming months. So yeah, feel free to check that out. Every little bit helps. But for now, I hope to see you again soon. Bye!